Welcome back to another episode of 15 Minutes Live.
This week, we are talking about employment, but really this concept of underemployment and instability, even when you're technically working a job. And you know, this is one of the byproducts of operating in a largely gig-driven economy, and one where you have a lot of people working as kind of independent contractors and freelancers or in some service-oriented positions where your schedule is in a constant state of flux. And you know, this was sparked by a recent New York Times article that really was highlighting the fact that instability and unpredictability are not just the things of a lower socioeconomic class, but also becoming increasingly a part of middle-class families as well.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that as the larger companies have gotten a lot more savvy with the tax code and recognized that by shifting more of their employee base to a 1099 status, that they could actually, you know, they could save money, they could be more profitable. And you know, at the end of the day, it probably goes back to our quarterly earnings issue that we have here in the States, where that kind of takes precedence over everything. So now, like everything else that's kind of being pushed down to all the little people that make the organization work, and that's where we are. You know, that said, I think the gig economy has always been there.
Yeah.
It's just now, I think, with all these apps and services and sites that are built to cater towards the gig economy, it's now being surfaced, and we're actually having a conversation about it, which I think is a good thing.
Well, and you know, I think there's no more prominent example, perhaps, than Uber, who you know, went to court to fight: are these employees or are these independent contractors? And the argument can be made in a lot of different contexts for why being an independent contractor can be a beneficial way to operate. But then there are a lot of issues that come up around why it's more beneficial for the employer than the employee as well.
Yeah, and I think, you know, from an employee perspective, or not an employee, but from a driver perspective in the context of Uber, you can make it work for you, right? But you have to be savvy. You have to be, I would say, more of a seasoned entrepreneur, somebody who's run a business of some sort, of some kind in the past, to be able to know to take advantage of the different tax laws and setting up your own LLC and, you know, timing the best shifts and things like that. So you know, there definitely is an advantage there for the savvy driver who knows how to run their own business. But if you're just starting off and you've never done anything like that before, then, you know, chances are you're leaving a lot of that money on the table and, you know, kind of getting the worst of both sides.
Yeah, and that's affected so many different industries. Academia even has shifted largely to an adjunct model where you're at this weird place where you're not a full employee, but you're not totally a contractor either. So you kind of get screwed from both respects, from both sides. And it's really challenging. And to that same point that you just made, you know, a lot of academics certainly don't come into that world with a lot of entrepreneurial know-how and figuring out how best to manage and predict their financial lives becomes really, really challenging for them. So it's not just the traditional industries of, say, you know, of service industries like waitressing, where you think that instability is just a part of it. In fact, that's a place where we're seeing interesting innovation, where you have some restaurants building in the service component, the tip, and the tax, so that there's greater consistency for their employees.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know, it's you know, we can look at it as a problem, and there's, you know, a whole plethora of articles out there that actually, you know, do perceive it as a problem and kind of make their case. But, you know, like any other problem, it's also an opportunity for innovation. I think, you know, in the case of the restaurant example, you know, it's an opportunity to move something that's kind of a broken model that doesn't really work for any of the parties involved, and turn that into something that actually makes it a better experience for everybody involved.
Yeah, I think I think that's like and there actually is huge debate within, not to go down the rabbit hole of the restaurant industry, but there's big debate internally as to whether or not that works and whether it's sustainable. But you have some pretty prominent restaurateurs taking a bet on that and really believing that it's better for both the front of the house and the back of the house, better for the customers, and just, you know, a way of creating greater stability all around. And so I think it'll be interesting to see if some of these other industries start to think in that same line of how in academia, how in you know, whether it's construction or in technology, you know, how can we create greater stability for both the employees or the workers that are sustaining us, and for the output that we're giving to our customers, because that's important as well, what you're delivering.
No, and I think you know, one of the positive byproducts of all this will eventually be minded populace, right? It's going to happen if things continue in this direction, where larger companies don't want to shed the burden of having employees and having people to take care of and look after. People will take care of themselves. Now that's like a, you know, maybe a laissez-faire, you know, capitalism kind of point of view, but it will happen just by the nature of the environment.
Well, I think it will, but not without casualties, right? So I think
So right.
The goal is
So
to eliminate that pain as much as possible, and I think that takes I think that starts from the top down. I think there really have to be some visionaries in some of these companies who recognize the fact that it doesn't just improve the lives of the workers, but also the customers that they're serving, and that it enhances the output as well. It's a win-win. So, you know, we'd be curious to hear if your industry, you know, if you're recognizing any kind of instability, if you're seeing programs or processes put in place to try and level that out a bit, how the gig economy and the rise of its prominence is also affecting whatever company or industry that you operate in. So please find us in the comments and subscribe to keep up with more conversations.
Yep, and we'll be back next week.